ties back to like the know a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two.
Yes.
Like after you.
There you go. Tying back in your insurance. I knew it was coming.
But after you experience a couple of things.
Yeah.
Like for you, I bet you could say the people who left were the people that didn't need in my life anyway, and the ones who stuck around were the ones that were supposed to be there despite the boundary that you set.
Y'all, I kid you not. Like he who will remain nameless, this was years ago. It's been like 7-8 years ago. But I was like, these are breakups and things that happen that you're friggin' devastated, crawling on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. Life is never going to be the same.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Renew Podcast. I am your fearless host. We'll see. We're hoping we're fearless today because it's a good one. I'm Kristen Andre, and we are glad you're with us because beside me today is the marvelous Miss Mendoza. In preparing for today's talk, we have already kind of lost it completely. So
off the rail.
Today, we've gone off the rails. We are glad you're here because today we are talking about the givers and the takers. The people that are the givers, the people that are the takers. And we have titled this episode, Bitches and Boundaries.
She's only going to say it once, so
I'm only going to say it once because for those of you guys that watch me a lot, I'm not the biggest cusser. I do cuss a lot at my children, which is probably in therapy for it. We're working on it. But I don't cuss a ton. But I think this episode is worth it. I think this discussion around the biatches and the boundaries that we need to set is important.
It's warranted for this occasion.
It is warranted. So, I was teasing that it really is about the givers and the takers. But because I feel like so much in life, and I see this with my coaching clients, I see it with my friends, there are people who are just natural givers that do a lot for other people. And there are people who are takers that take a lot from other people and expect and demand. And those two are usually in relationships with each other, but it causes a lot of problems. So the reason we titled it this is the boundaries is what I really want to talk about, because I feel like for people who are givers, there's a quote I heard, because y'all know I love a good quote. It's, if you're a giver, you have to have boundaries because the takers don't have any. You have to know your limits. So the whole discussion around, I'll say it again, bitches and boundaries has to do with the fact that a lot of times when we try to put boundaries in place, we're perceived as being bitchy. Why is that, Miss Mendoza? Enlighten us.
I'm going to be a little State Farm. So State Farm, if you're listening, we'd love your sponsorship.
That's right. We will take it.
I
am a client.
The tagline of I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two.
That's not State Farm.
I thought it was.
It's Mayhem.
No.
I don't know. Anyway, proceed.
Now I don't know the actor's name.
Giggling. Proceed.
You know the guy with the glasses. Okay.
No, yeah.
We'll have to look this up. But
I'm looking. I know.
Now we're going to have to look it up.
Proceed.
Distraction.
We're State Farm.
Known a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. Like a lot of the issues that I see, including myself, when it comes to boundaries, is the way we deliver the boundary, the way we say the boundary.
Okay.
If you are wishy-washy on the boundary, it could be very unclear.
Right, so give us some examples there. What do you mean? So like with boundaries with friends and relationships, because I think there are personal boundaries, there are professional boundaries, and there are some, let's just say it, there are some boundaries that you guys should know that they are boundaries. But
that's
some people
true.
don't have common sense.
Yes. There's some that shouldn't even be
But what are
discussed.
what are you talking about?
I respect you as a person, but we're not going to talk about this.
Okay, so that's a fair one.
As an example.
Okay.
Maybe compared to, I don't really want to talk about that right now because then I've just left the door open. Like, well,
so
maybe
wishy-washy
I want to talk about it later.
Language.
Yeah.
Well, wishy-washy language, I talk about that a lot with clients too, because I think we do it in a lot of aspects when we're not certain of what we want.
Yes.
Like even in sales, I see it a ton in sales with some of the executives I coach. It's like, maybe we should do this, or if it's the wishy-washy words that we put in there that people think, what is that Dumb and Dumber quote? So you're saying I got a chance.
Yes.
So that's kind of what it is. It doesn't close the door. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. Where do you think people fail to set boundaries the most? Like when I think about it, it's more like, I think it's in personal relationships. And I think this goes back to the givers and takers. It's we all know y'all know, if you're listening, you know who the givers are. You know the people in your world, personally and professionally, that just do all things for all people. And I will guarantee you they're friggin' exhausted because they don't know how to say no. Yeah, they don't know how to say no. So with that, it's kind of like, those are the ones that need to set boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's hard for givers to do that.
Well, and that's exactly where my mind first went when you asked the question, because if we don't stick to the boundaries we set for ourselves, then we've already lost any boundary that we're going to set both personally and professionally.
Okay.
So it's almost, in a way, it's almost like, well, okay, maybe you can confirm this again from what I've seen. This I have not experienced yet, but like parents and grounding, right? Like the adage of, I'm going to ground you and it's going to be for 3 weeks, but then if you let up in like a week and a half, the child's like, you don't really mean that.
I mean, that's probably a good example. My children, I don't know if you've heard from my children. For those of you guys that have seen prior episodes with one of my children co-hosting, you'll know that I'm up for Mom of the Year a lot, but it's I'm really not. But I think when we think about it with parenting, we do set boundaries, but the reason we set boundaries with our children is because we are trying to keep them safe. We are trying to not let them put their hand on the stove. We're trying to not let them drive too fast or sneak out or things. So we said that we're trying to not let them date the wrong person. We had a discussion about that at my house this week. Not because somebody was, but just hypotheticals. We do that to protect people.
Yeah.
And I think that's, with parenting, we do that a lot. But we've also got to, and we do that because we love them, right? Mm-hmm. We've got to love ourselves enough.
Yeah.
So I think Heidi, all right, so Heidi said great, all right, she said love her too. I think boundaries, Heidi, is about loving yourself and protecting yourself. Yep. And we do that and we set boundaries for our kids, because any of you guys that know me personally, I will cut a person when it comes to my kids. I really will. Like, this is when my black belt comes out if you mess with my kids. I will put a boundary up between anybody hurting my children. Or anybody in my circle, like my tiny little bubble. You mess with my circle, I get nice Kristen goes away. I mean, really easy. That's, if you ever want to see crazy Kristen, that's how to do it. But we don't do that for ourselves. And I know, I hope most of you guys listening love yourself enough to do it. But Lynn just said she struggled with this her whole life. And Lynn, I think that's common, and which is why Whitney and I wanted to do this. We just threw the cuss word in to keep everybody on their toes. But
and B&B kind of
went.
Goes together.
But I feel like so many of us struggle. I mean, to your point, Lynn, all of us at some point have struggled, some more than others.
Yeah.
Why is it so tough, though? Why do you guys think, I'd love to hear the comments, why do you guys think it's a challenge to set a boundary?
Part of it, I feel like, is we don't want to come across as cutting people out or being rude, avoiding the I'm better than, you're less than. Like, I think a little bit of it, we struggle with that. I think some of it, I'm thinking of just even the parent-child relationship, because, right, your dynamic changes. You do put that child first. I think some of us have probably had situations where parents came before ourselves, where the child became the parent.
Yeah.
And we were taking care of our
parents.
Have
that.
And it almost feels like it's a foundation, right? If you start that early enough, you kind of just take that with you through the rest of your life, because you never really stopped to examine do we know what our boundaries are as well? Like, do we know what that is for ourselves?
I think that's part of it, is we need to figure out where we need to put boundaries in place. And I feel like for so many of us, we know when we need to hold a boundary. And it's the ookiness. Like, I always say, follow your gut. I'm a big person on follow your gut. And for those of you guys who have been listening for our 5 years, I talk about it a lot. All of the bonehead decisions I've made in my life, all of the the things I did really wrong, whether it was relationships or parenting or marriage or anything, it was when I didn't follow my gut. So I think in our gut, we know when somebody's crossed a line or when we need to put a boundary in place or when somebody's taking way more than they're giving.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we don't do it. So it's following the gut, the nudges, the God winks, whatever you want to call them, to honor ourselves enough to say, hey, look, this is not working for me. And that's hard sometimes because I think we're scared of what we might lose.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Like, how many of you guys, we don't have to have a show of hands unless you just want to show your hands. How many of you guys have had friendships, romantic relationships that you're going, but if I do this, what if they leave? What if they don't want to be my friend? What if they break up with me? I've heard this. I've said it a lot. I've heard it a lot. We're so afraid of losing something that we tolerate things we shouldn't be tolerating. And I'm as guilty of this as the next person. I've gotten way better at it, but I don't think I got good at it until I was probably late 40s. I mean, I said, you were still in your short pants when I got good. No, this is, it was late 40s, 50s. And I finally I've said that many times for those of you guys listening that are over 50, something about crossing 50, you're like, I don't need to deal with this anymore. And we're trying to kind of educate the youngsters on how not to deal with it, because
kind of ties back to like the know a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two.
Yes.
Like after you,
there you go, tying back in your insurance. I knew it was coming.
But after you experience a couple of things, like for you, I bet you could say the people who left were the people that didn't need in my life anyway, and the ones who stuck around were the ones that were supposed to be there despite the boundary that you set.
Y'all, I kid you not. Like, he who will remain nameless, this was years ago. It's been like 7-8 years ago. But I was like, these are breakups and things that happen that you're friggin' devastated, crawling on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. Life is never going to be the same.
Yeah.
That fast forward 7, 8, 10. This is not my ex-husband, but I want to make that clear. He's a good dude. But one that I'm like, I'm never getting over this. This is the end of the world. Like, we're all drama. Like, I'm not a drama person at all, but we've all had those moments where we're like, I don't know how I'll ever get over this. And then you give yourself the benefit of time. Mm-hmm. Like, if we could jump into like time travel and 10 years down the road, I look back now going, and my thought now is not I got over it. It's what the hell was I ever doing with him in the first place, right?
Right.
So I am so grateful for where my life is now, the normal people in it. Because I would say the last probably 5 years, I think, have been so good and growth-minded because I did, for sure, I have definite boundaries in place. Like, I don't tolerate people who are takers. But it's not easy to do, So Heidi said she finally started removing Girl, I'm with you, right? It is so peaceful. You said peaceful letting go. It's tough to do it, but once you do it, it's incredible just to see how freeing it's literally freeing. Like, I don't have a single person in my little tiny bubble that I don't enjoy being around. And even, people, friendships that I've had and, people I've dated in the past, recent past, they're still good friends. Like, you realize what's for you and what's not for you. And you can still have great people in your life and have friendships that are engaging and nutritious. But both parties have to agree to the boundary rules, I think. And I'm not talking about boundaries like you shouldn't slap my butt when I'm walking by. Now, if we're dating, that's different. But if, you know what I mean? Like, they're normal boundaries, like in a professional workplace or normal. You shouldn't be grabbing people in the street or in an elevator. I don't know. Common sense, right? But I'm talking about relational boundaries where you're like, hey, this isn't working, or I feel like you're being mean, or, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, what? Oh, did she get a new question on here? Okay.
Yeah. Lynn was responding to kind of talking about why we struggle with setting boundaries. So she said birth order, how you were parented, and
I see it now.
If boundaries were crossed going up, that has an impact on your adulthood.
That's true. Lynn, that's a good point because, birth order, we were actually talking about this, doing a different subject on birth order. We were talking with a friend of ours recently about how that affects things and everything. But I'm the oldest, so I tend to be, shocking, a little direct. I don't know if you've noticed, but I think it is. And how you're parented. And Lynn, to your point, that's a big thing because, like, for me, my parents, I love them both dearly, but they are very different from one another. And my parenting style is extremely different from the girl's dad's parenting style. And I think it does play into it. Like it just, but one thing you said, and this is, if boundaries were crossed growing up as a kid, it's so hard, right? If you're growing up and you're like, don't do this, and somebody crosses that and it's an adult, it's tough, right?
Yep.
But this is where I say this frequently. I always say you can't live in the suck. We all had crappy things that happened to us. I don't know a single person. If you are somebody who has not had trauma, who has not had major stuff, people mentioning trauma a lot on here, I'd be shocked, right? All of us have had trauma. Some of them are minor. Some of them are ones that it breaks my heart, and I don't know that I could pray enough for all the things these people went through.
Yeah.
All of us have had something to some degree. But my theory, and maybe this is naive or something, but I'm always like, it's a choice to live in the suck. And I say that to clients all the time. I'm like, how long are you going to live in the suck? Because I can't do anything with you until we decide to move out of the suck, right? But I think boundaries are a lot of that. Like, yes, all this happened. Yes, it did. And that is why we are the way we are. But we also have the gift to be able to change who we are. Does that mean you might lose some friends? Yep. I for sure lost people. I did. But my thought is, if I put a boundary in place that's reasonable, right? I'm not saying I won't be your friend unless you write me a check for $5 million. Like, if I'm putting a reasonable boundary in place and you are unwilling to observe the boundary, I think you've really got to ask yourself, or I've got to ask myself, is this somebody I really want? Like, but you've got to be honest and say, hey, this is how I feel, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting as we get older. You'll see this someday, young whippersnapper. You will, but it's true. But we learn it. We all know it. I mean, even in 30s, and even you guys listen that are in your 20s. I'm pretty sure, and I'm looking at some of the comments rolling in, and I know a lot of you guys personally. So we've got mix of ages here. So I'm really curious at what age you feel, and it may be TBD, but what age you feel like you started to go, okay, I've really got to pay attention to this. When did you start paying attention to some boundaries?
I feel like it is accelerated is probably the right word. For me, the year I turned 35.
Okay. What made it accelerate? Because Heidi just had a good point. She said she would give, and it wasn't reciprocated. Like pouring from an empty cup was the example. And that's so true, because I feel like at some point something goes, I can't do this anymore.
Well, and to Heidi's point, you do that, and for me, that's probably when I realized, look, and I'm not saying go out into the world and just be me, because that doesn't get you anywhere.
Well, then you're a taker
either.
That's not good either.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is a balance there. But what I have noticed is you've got to pick up on those cues of when you are dealing with a taker.
Yes.
So that again, when and where to put the boundary in, because I think the core of that is, for some situations, some people throughout life, no matter what you do, no matter what you give, no matter how you adapt, it's not necessarily going to change the outcome of it.
Because some people just suck. Say it, Whitney. Say it.
Some people suck.
They do, right?
It's true.
And we got to, I
felt
think
good.
that's, you're welcome. Glad it's cathartic for you. But I feel like with a lot of this is we've got to, what this keeps coming up in my head or bringing up in my head is we have to be very in tune to us and how we're feeling. And we have to be really super honest with ourselves. And that's easy to do in retrospect, but not always easy to do.
Well, and that kind of made me think of the text conversation you and I were having last night about that new book that I picked up.
Yes.
Which is, kind of echoes what you were saying. He took it from a time standpoint of one of the quotes in the book is he's saying it like every bad decision he ever made was when he was in a hurry.
Yes.
He goes on to say, like, peace, love, joy can't coexist in hurry. Sometimes the decisions that we make are because we didn't stop and actually think about the thing.
Yes.
So we either didn't stop to think about what the value to us was out of it. We didn't stop to think about the the decision, the boundary. We didn't even stop to think about, is this a thing I should do? Like when you think about friendships or people you date and you're putting in, sometimes it's even a business deal. You're so maybe excited about it or you're rushing into it that you don't actually stop to examine, is this actually something that is good, that I should want?
Right. Well, and I'd say this a lot, going back to my Kristen quotes. If it's not bringing you joy or moving you closer to your goal, it should be a no. Don't say it. Don't date it. Don't do business with it. For the love of all things holy, don't marry it. Do all the things, right? Mm-hmm. But we have to know that. Now, does that mean that if you go yes and something brings you joy that it may not forever? Yeah, that happens. Friendships fizzle, relationships fizzle. Not all of them, not the right ones, but I think boundaries are a big thing. And Lynn, nice comment. Self-love is honoring your own boundary. And it takes discipline to say no, so we have to practice it. So I agree with that, because you don't all of a sudden, I'm going to sit here and tell you guys to say no to if it's not bringing you joy, to put boundaries in place with the people and the situations you need to put them in place with. But it is not going to be like, oh, Kristen said it, I'm going to do it, now everything's fine. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of practice.
Yeah. I've gotten to where
I was a slow learner. It took me a hot minute.
Y'all, I've gotten to where I will put notes to myself. That could be, if it's the background on my phone, the background on my laptop, if I put little notes in my notebook, if I do little Post-it notes, because again, I get so in the moment, I forget, no, Whitney, we don't like that, remember?
But it's okay to remind yourself. I do that. Say I don't have it on my screen. I have a couple quotes that I switch out my screensaver. I got some cute on there now, but I've got I switch it out. I switch it out and put quotes a lot of things I need to remember, right? Because Elisa Washington's really good with words of wisdom. But I send. It's funny that you don't post it. I send myself text. Do you guys do that? When you need to remind yourself, not just to do the to-dos? When I text myself, I move them off. I take them off my text screen.
Yes.
But I send myself reminders and quotes and little encouragement to Kristen text.
Yeah.
Which is fun, because this takes practice. It takes practice. So I feel like, we've got to really figure out how we can do this more often.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason we titled it Bitches and Boundaries. I said it again. This is 3 times. I feel like I'm not even Catholic. I'm going to have to go to whatever the thing they do is. And just say, I'm sorry. Jesus, I'm sorry.
We got a conference room in the back.
I know. Sorry for cussing. But it's true and the reason we titled that is because I feel like a lot of times when we do set boundaries, we are perceived as that being bitchy. We are perceived as I can't believe she's doing that. Why? And I want you guys to know that is not what boundaries are about. And if people perceive your reasonable boundary as you being bitchy, they are not your people.
And that's because they ain't got none.
That's
they ain't
right.
got no boundaries. A lot of time people be upset.
Or they're takers.
Yeah, that's true too.
Because I feel like, if people respect, I don't have a single, if you really look at those, you guys listen, think about your people closest to you guys. I talk about the tiny bubble, my grasp group a lot. I could say anything to them. If they think I'm being wackadoodle going, Kristen, that's seriously not reasonable, they're going to tell me, and I'm going to respect that. But if I tell them anything hey, I don't feel like talking about this. This is, I'm not in a good mood, but not in a good place to be able to discuss this. That was the example used at the beginning. Your people get that. They know that, and they're going to honor and respect that. Mm-hmm. And my challenge to each of you guys listening is, if the people you're trying to set boundaries with cannot honor them, you need to really evaluate if you need those people in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes that means that y'all got some hard decisions to make, but what you are tolerating, you're choosing. That was a sound bite. Look at that.
The Chris and Andre t-shirt line.
The Chris and Andre. I know, we're growing things for the t-shirt line. But it's true, though. What you tolerate, what you're not saying no to, what you're tolerating, you're choosing. It's a choice.
But that's also so freeing. You have the choice.
Yes.
To
it's freeing, but it's scary.
No, well,
because of the outcome. But I'm going back. I'm still Whitney's quote again. Know a thing because I've seen it, or know a few things because I've seen a few things.
Know a thing or two because I've
seen a thing or two. But it's true. The older we get, when you look back, and we can't get those years back. There are so many mistakes I made. There were either I set too many boundaries or I didn't set enough boundaries. There's a boundary balance in there somewhere. but you
Yeah.
look back and you don't get that time back. So what I would encourage you guys listening that are challenged with this, Lynn and Heidi and some of you guys that are saying, I've struggled with this forever, is we aren't going to get more time. We don't get years tacked on the end because we said, oh, okay, I made some mistakes here. Let me tack it on the end. It doesn't work that way. So we can continue to trudge through and live in the suck, or we can do the things we need to do. And I'm a pusher, not a drug pusher, but I'm a goodness pusher, because I want everybody to be able to do the things and have the fun and get rid of the toxic people and just have happy, jolly people around you.
Well, I guess, I mean, I know everybody's situation's different, but I also have grown to learn to look at it as it was a lesson or an opportunity, right?
For
I
sure.
almost, how do you know something's good if you don't know something's bad?
I think it's a lesson for sure.
Yeah.
All of the stones y'all threw at me, I'm standing on them now, right? I mean, it's really
True.
what happens. It makes you the person you are.
Yeah.
I would not be as, I was going to say compassionate, but I think people might differ. That might not, might not be one of the first adjectives you learned that you use with me. But I wouldn't be the person I am if I hadn't gone through the struggles that I had. And some of this, now not all struggles are with bad people. Right?
Right.
Some of the
Right,
struggles
right,
I
right.
went through were with good people.
Yep.
Some of the things, the boundaries I had to put in place and the things that happened in my life led to really good things, like really good things. So they're not all bad. Like, I think we think of boundaries like, oh, we're going to piss people off and it's going to be bad. But it can put you, when used correctly, when you use your powers for good, it can put you on the path to some really cool things and some really awesome people, right?
I feel like
You're smiling.
I feel like Lisa Washington would be so proud
Is
of
she
us
proud of me right now?
Yes.
Lisa. Well, she is. I know she's not watching it live because she's on air this morning, because I did see that promo too. So, Lisa, I'm going to send her this replay.
Yeah.
But it's true, though, because we all had, and I think we started off talking about this earlier. I think it was Heidi that mentioned it. We've all had some kind of trauma, macro trauma. You guys that have listened for a while know when a word becomes a buzzword, I begin to hate it. I hate the word trauma. I understand people have been through it, but I think people have overused it. I don't think we've touched on this before. We probably should do an episode on this. I'm gonna probably get canceled for it, because here's the thing. I know there are massive traumas. I said it earlier. There are things that people have been through in their life that break my heart. The fact your mommy didn't buy your Mercedes is not a micro trauma that you are trying to deal with, right? So let's be real about it. So for those of you guys listening who are mad because you didn't like the car mommy daddy brought you, I am talking to you, right? That's not trauma.
Yeah.
And it's also not a boundary. Like, set a boundary with your kids. Say, no, I'm not buying your Mercedes. My little one wants a G-Wagon. What the? Really? I'm like, you don't have a job. So she's not getting a G-Wagon. Don't at me or don't write me. She's not getting one. But I mean, these are things where if we can really start to look at what's real, what's important, what are the things I need to set some reasonable boundaries around, it puts you on a good path of some cool people.
Yeah.
But the choice is yours.
Absolutely.
Living in the suck or setting the boundaries that you need to set. What say you, Mrs. Mendoza?
I agree with that 100%. And I mean, again, I'm even thinking, getting a job. I mean, think of all the things that you learn out of that, right? Like oh God, now I've got Miley Cyrus in my head. It's The Climb.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So we did an episode on that like years ago on The Climb. I feel like we did. I love
maybe we ought to revisit it.
I do like some Miley Cyrus.
To put the bow on it, it's like that's where the view is the best, is at the top, and
Yes.
it's a little bit of a struggle when you climb, and you just have to kind of view it like that.
Yes.
In a
think
lot
it's
of
true.
ways where you can.
I think it's true. And I like that analogy because it's a journey. Everything we're on is a journey. And you can tolerate the bitches or you can set the boundaries. But here's the thing. With all of it, if you are not happy with it and you do nothing, if you don't take all the stuff we're telling you and say, here's where I need to make some changes, you do nothing. You are choosing to stay in the suck. And it's a choice. But then you forfeit the right to complain about it. So make the choices, set the boundaries, and really, really, really examine who and what you're tolerating, and who and what, most importantly, you deserve in your life.
Yep.
Miss
So
Whitney,
good.
I liked it. This is good stuff.
It was. I loved all
Lisa
the comments,
Washington's
too,
gonna.
so.
I know. Yeah. Thank you guys for the comments, and I'm sure we'll see some more because this is just like as we're airing. But I can't wait for this. This will be a fun one to
like it.
continue discussing, and we'll have to keep diving in. We may have to do a follow up to this one as well. We got to come up with some catchy titles. So, as always, to the marvelous Miss Mendoza, thank you.
Of course,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
sitting by my side again.
Glad
the
to be
last
here.
5 years. So, you guys. Do something, make some changes, make some choices, and set some loving boundaries so you can be on the journey to some really, really cool things. So thank you for being with us on this episode of Renew, and we will see you again next week.